Hello everybody, welcome back to a brand new video. This is your boy the Chaotic One, and today we're doing a what if. I think my last what if was what if the Republicans stayed as Rockefeller Republicans, or Rockefeller Republicans stayed in control of the GOP. Whatever the name was, you guys enjoyed it. It's turned into one of my most popular videos, not in the top 10. The most popular video was the president ranking video. People love that one. But we're doing another one today, and this one was requested. Speaking of requests, the phone that I had that had all of your requests on it, it's gone. All the information I had, all your requests, it's gone. So I'm sorry. If you want to re-request every single video that you've requested that I didn't do, that's fine. I will add it to my new phone where I got a new requests notes pad thing. So I apologize in advance. So let's get on the road with this what if. So if we start off in the 1976 election, the only major difference is Reagan is the nominee instead of Ford. He beats out an incumbent president, considering that, he wasn't that far off. I think Ford won the popular vote by 8 points, which for an incumbent president, that's pretty abysmal in a primary. Carter would still get nominated by the Democrats as well. And so Carter would do what he did back in 1980, and he would paint Ronald Reagan as this far-right extremist. And back in 76, Reagan was actually viewed like that. However, in 1980, there was a much different story there. Reagan would do a lot better in certain areas than Ford did, and Carter would do better than he did in IRL. But Carter would still win 284 to 253 to become the 39th president. Carter would defeat Reagan, and Reagan would never become president in this timeline. Now, Carter's first term is relatively the same as it was IRL. Of course, we have the oil crisis, the energy crisis, the Iran hostage crisis. So those crises still happen. Carter would still go in 1980, a very unpopular president. And the Republicans nominate former CIA director under the Nixon, or it's either the Nixon or Ford administration, George H.W. Bush, and Bush chooses New York Congressman Jack Kemp as his running mate. And this would be a very similar election to the 1988 election, except, Carter would probably still hold on to West Virginia and Georgia, and possibly even Maryland as well. Bush would go on to defeat Carter. Carter would do a little better against Bush than he did Reagan, and Bush's term is pretty much going to be similar to a what-if video you can find on the Alternate History Hub's channel, What If Ronald Reagan Never Became President. I will link that down in the description, but I'll give a abridged version of that. So Bush would still be on the whole economic freedoms things. However, if Reagan is a 10, Bush is like a 6 or a 7. People will still economically feel better. I'm really abridging this for you because these are certain words. These are words he used in the video. However, it's not as drastic as it was in the Reagan administration, right? Bush is a very quiet president compared to Reagan. He's not going to be as popular as he was, right? So heading on in 1984, Walter Mondale, the vice president under Jimmy Carter, will still get the nomination. Geraldine Ferraro will become the first woman to ever be nominated on a major ticket. And Mondale will, do better than just winning one state. He'll win a couple more, that being Washington, Iowa, Wisconsin, Hawaii, Massachusetts, and Rhode Island. So he'll do a lot better because, Bush ain't as popular as Reagan. Mondale will probably still fuck up, saying he will raise taxes. So there you go. And so Republican President George Bush will defeat Democrat Vice President Walter Mondale 475 to 63 to win re-election. Of course, the Soviet Union will still crash near the end of Bush's second term, similar how it did to the end of Reagan's second term. In my presidential ranking video, I made a mistake and said it crashed in the beginning of Bush's first term. I made a mistake. I can admit that. Again, the Alternate History Hub's What If video will be in the description below if you want a more in-depth version of what happens in certain events in this video. So we head on to 1988. Jack Kemp will be the Republican nominee, the vice president under George H.W. Bush in this timeline. He will nominate Nevada Senator Paul Laxalt as his running mate, and the Democrats will still nominate Michael Dukakis. Fair warning, the Democrats will keep the exact same nominees in this timeline as they did IRL. Republicans will not, for the most part. Of course, this election is an odd one. Jack Kemp will still... Also, have I ever mentioned Jack Kemp kind of looks like Donald Trump? Have I ever mentioned that? He really looks like Donald Trump. But, of course, Kemp will still do the whole, Massachusetts liberal, and Dukakis will probably pose on a tank with a military-looking yarmulke on his head. Is that offensive? I hope not. So, however, since, Bush is not on the ticket, Dukakis ends up winning Texas due to Benson being his running mate, and he also wins Louisiana due to some, neighboring crossover votes. But Kemp will become the 41st president in this term. It's like, I don't want to say he has a better time than Bush. There's still a recession, however, don't expect taxes to be raised under Kemp like there was in Bush, so you might see a government shutdown, which honestly will hurt Kemp than the raising taxes did to Bush. Of course, the whole NAFTA thing is still going to be a big debate topic for 1992. Also, we really need to talk about the whole foreign policy thing. So back in the 90s, we were really hearing about Al-Qaeda, coming to prominence, right? We start hearing that right now, of course. So foreign policy kind of gets moved up roughly a decade. Again, I'm still basing this certain part of the video off of that alternate history of video. Again, link in the description. So, of course, the U.S. is probably is going to be attacked about roughly a decade sooner. Al-Qaeda, Osama bin Laden, or whoever's ruling Al-Qaeda at this point, is now making threats under the Kemp administration instead of the Clinton administration. However, Kemp, like Clinton, isn't going to do anything about it, which is going to haunt Bill Clinton like it haunted George W. Bush. Heading on to 1992, Ross Perot is still running as both Clinton and Kemp will support NAFTA. And, of course, Clinton will end up defeating Jack Kemp. However, Kemp will do just a little better, not by much, though. But Bill Clinton still becomes the 42nd president, and, of course, he's going to be dealing with a lot. Of course, we got the build-up to the balanced budget that, will never happen in this timeline because we're going to be dealing with a foreign issues. Because, a 9/11-like attack might still happen, but it'll happen sooner during, the beginning of Clinton's term, the first year. Probably won't be the Twin Towers, but it'll be something, right? Al-Qaeda will still attack, and, we will go to war in Iraq, about a decade sooner, right? 8 or 9 years sooner. All of our foreign policy issues, they're moved up 10 years. That's the last time I'm going to say it. Heading into 1996, we have a very interesting election. As you can see here, Bill Clinton would do a lot better than he did IRL. Ross Perot is still running. However, he's not going to be running on the whole NAFTA thing. He's going to be running on, social issues, trying to take votes away from Pat Buchanan because Pat Buchanan is even more protectionist than Perot is. However, Buchanan is, very extreme right now, and he's now going to have a permanent influence over the Republican Party as a paleocon. Of course, not that the Republican Party is going to turn into a paleo-conservative party. The Tea Party is actually, going to be a major driving force going forward as, sort of the compromise ideology between neoconservatism and paleoconservatism. So we're going to be getting some sort of socially moderate to socially conservative to economically libertarian, which will help them in a lot of places and then hurt them in others. You'll see what I mean later. Bill Clinton will, of course, win in a massive landslide, bigger than he did IRL. As you can see by the map here, it's kind of funky looking, as Buchanan does very well in the rural areas. In a little bit of the white working class areas, he's opposed to NAFTA. That's why he wins Wisconsin and Pennsylvania. However, Clinton's going to fucking demolish him in the urban areas, the suburbs, and, with minorities. Even if Buchanan picked the very first black person in this timeline to be on a major ticket, that being Alan Keyes, who's just a little left-wing compared to Buchanan, but still very right-wing at the end of the day. Buchanan just gets demolished this election. Bill Clinton wins re-election as we continue to deal with the war in Iraq, or a similarity to it. Heading into 2000, we continue this with George W. Bush winning the Republican nomination. Still, he is the son of a somewhat popular president in George H.W. Bush, and the Democrat primary will go to Vice President Al Gore, very similar. And we have essentially the exact same map from 2000 with a very minor change to it. Let's see if you can see what that change is. I'm not going to say what it is. I know what it is, which is a shock to you probably, but Bush does not choose Dick Cheney because Bush is not isn't well, he's very left-wing compared to Pat Buchanan. He's a neocon, not a paleocon. So he needs to pick someone who is in the middle of those two as an olive branch to them, or he's going to lose the election. And he chooses a somewhat of a nationalist kind of Republican in Gary Bauer, who served in this timeline under the Reagan administration. This time it would be his own father's administration, so he still has ties to both wings of the party. So Gary Bauer ends up becoming vice president in this timeline because Bush will still defeat Al Gore 276-261 to become the 43rd president. Of course, we will absolutely still have the Afghanistan war while we are still dealing with the Iraq war. Well, actually, the Iraq war will actually end in like 2002, 2003, a decade after it started. However, after that, we go into Afghanistan, which Bush will just become unpopular for, right? So for 2004, the major issue is, why are we in another war after we just entered a war? So, and Bush barely wins re-election. Like less so. Like, you thought he barely won in our timeline? He barely wins in this one. 271 to 266. Like, literally, any state that would have gone to Kerry would have been it for Bush. So, and even Bush goes on to lose the popular vote as well, which in this timeline, the popular vote isn't so divided, or the popular vote isn't so lopsided as it is in our current timeline. This one, it's not, but Bush still loses the popular vote because the Afghanistan war is more unpopular now than it was in our timeline, because we just got out of the Iraq war, and people really do not trust Bush at all, especially with the whole Patriot Act that, I could imagine Clinton having a similar Patriot Act that did not target the Fourth Amendment, but then Bush would have like some sort of expansion going into the Afghanistan war that, the Tea Party and the paleocons in his own party would be against. However, it only passed because, neoliberals in the Democrat Party helped him pass it. You understand what I'm saying? So heading into 2008, the financial crash still happens. Of course, we have a new threat due to the Afghanistan war, and that being ISIS, or, a similar group to that. So the two major things in the 2008 election is ISIS and the economy. Democrats are still nominating Vice President Barack Obama, or Senator Barack Obama. Why did I say Vice President? Probably because the guy he's facing is the actual Vice President in this timeline, Gary Bauer, or Bayer. How do you pronounce his name? I don't know. But as you can see, Bayer had a lot of, competition. He had Mitt Romney, he had Ron Paul, Rudy Giuliani, Fred Thompson, Duncan Hunter. A very wide range of ideologies in the Republican primary. Of course, he won because he's the vice president, and so he needs to make a olive branch to the center, which he's going to in Pennsylvania governor, or I guess the Homeland Security Secretary, Tom Ridge, who is pro-choice, a pro-choice Republican, which kind of hurts him a little bit. Just depends on how vicious the paleocon wing is in this timeline compared to what they are right now. If they're anything like they are now, oh my god, he's going to get torn apart. But, and Obama is going to do a lot better because, Bauer isn't that great of a campaigner. He's not a great candidate. Never was, and still isn't in this timeline. He was just more of a, hey, this helps George W. Bush, and especially since he picked Tom Ridge, a pro-choice Republican, he's not going to get good turnout. And Obama's going to win with 422 electoral votes to his 116. However, Bayer still ends up winning Indiana because, Indiana would, the rules would still be very much ruby red by now compared to what they were in 2008, and Bayer would still win it, even if it's by a lean margin. So Obama becomes president. Of course, he's now dealing with Afghanistan. He's got to deal with an economic recession. And, Obamacare still happens, even though we don't expect Republicans of any kind to be voting for this, including Joseph Chow, because paleocons are very vicious when it comes to, certain policies, and they're very open to primary challenges, compared to, what they are now. More so, because if you think the America First Republicans are bad, paleocons are much worse. So are paleo-liberals, but Democrats haven't had that problem yet. Kind of makes you wonder if they ever will. Hopefully. Just because I want to see it. Anyway. Heading on to 2012, the Republicans, for some reason, nominate the former senator out of Pennsylvania, Rick Santorum. However, he does choose Paul Ryan as his running mate and hoping to win the Rust Belt. However, due to Republicans not having that white working class appeal, Democrats will forever have that, or at least temporarily so until they learn that populist branch of their party, which they don't in this timeline, by the way, or at least where I'd leave off at. Rick Santorum, he ends up winning the nomination. Paul Ryan, that him being a kind of a olive branch from the Tea Party and the neocon base, perfect choice in his eyes. Of course, Obama does a little worse. Of course, Colorado, that is a Republican stronghold, until weed is legalized, and then it just keeps moving left rapidly. New Mexico, the Southwest, very much Republican strongholds. The libertarian economic views is popular there. Iowa, a swing area, but Republican-leaning. Ohio, swing area, left-leaning, because of the white working class. New Hampshire, swing state, right-leaning, libertarian views. Of course, if an election is based off social views, it goes left. If it's economic, it goes right. Foreign, right. Anything else? Probably left. Depends. So yes, Obama does defeat Santorum 333 to 205. And of course, we still have a gridlock term for Barack Obama. Not much gets done. However, we do leave Afghanistan in this timeline. And we can finally just forget all that. However, Obama does not botch the Afghanistan withdrawal, like Biden did. It's not smooth sailing, but it's a lot more smoother than saying he fucked up, right? We still get out of there. Afghanistan's fine. It didn't fall. Seoul, I think. No. Kabul, I think. Something like that. Nothing fell. Heading off into 2016, Ted Cruz, of course, like I said, there is no Donald Trump this timeline. So Ted Cruz will end up winning the Republican nomination in 2016. Because, the Tea Party has a firm control over the Republican Party, as I said before, due to Pat Buchanan's influence. Because, very right-wing individual. Cruz would still pick Carly Fiorina as his running mate. I do not believe we've had a female vice president yet. No, we haven't. So, Carly Fiorina ends up becoming the first female vice president, because Cruz does end up beating Hillary Clinton in this election. And progressives still have their uprising in the Democrat Party due to Bernie Sanders' candidacy, so take that with what you will. So Ted Cruz ends up defeating Hillary Clinton 283 to 255 to become the 45th president. Now, I talk about social issues, but I don't know what the foreign issues. I don't know what the foreign policies and issues in 2026 and beyond is going to look like. You know what I'm saying? I don't know, so I can't really say. Economic and social-wise, it's very similar to what we saw in, our timeline. When it comes to immigration, Cruz is going to be very tough on immigration. He'll be softer than Trump would, but he'll take more of an action, a more of aggressive action than Trump did, because Trump was very keen on listening to establishment politicians. So that's why he didn't get much done. Cruz, on the other hand, he'll get shit done. I wouldn't say we'll get a border wall, however, immigration, he'll hold a record for, deporting, the most immigrants, or illegal immigrants, I should say. Because if I just say immigrants, that could cause a problem. Other things, don't expect a government shutdown at all during Cruz's term, even if he's an unpopular president similar to Trump, because he's a very divisive figure. He still has a way to work with the other side, whether or not he agrees with them. He still gets what he wants, even if he has to sacrifice small shit, right? So don't expect a government shutdown of any case. NAFTA is still firmly in control of, the trade negotiations of the country, so don't expect Republicans to do any sort of better with Rust Belt voters or white working class in general. Heading into 2020, of course, COVID is still a major factor in this election, so as with any incumbent president, now that I've become an adult and understand how things work, also Colorado is no longer a Republican stronghold, as it has firmly swung left enough that it has become a blue state, even if Biden only wins it by like 2 points. Speaking of which, Biden does worse in this election because, Republicans are doing better in certain areas. As you can see, New Hampshire is still, it went red. New Mexico went red. Arizona, Nevada, due to the libertarian economic policies of Ted Cruz. However, Biden does win in North Carolina and Georgia due to, Republicans not doing well with black voters. They do worse than they did IRL, which I bet you didn't think that was possible. Also, Ted Cruz did face off against a primary challenge from Maryland Governor Larry Hogan you know, a Bush Republican in this timeline. So I guess you could say a neocon. However, I wouldn't say he's a neocon, but he's not. He's a compassionate conservative. Let's just say that he's compassionate conservative, quiet conservative, whatever you want to call it. But Joe Biden still ends up becoming the 46th president, defeating Ted Cruz, 295-243. Thank God we don't have the 306 to 232 curse in this timeline. I swear to God, 2024. Anyway, sorry, just had to rant a little bit. So, going forward to until 2023, somewhat of a deadlock, of course. Things would be very much the same, except Biden wouldn't be dealing with the Afghanistan withdrawal, so he doesn't have to botch that. Honestly, Biden's presidency would just be really quiet. Of course, the economy is still not good under Biden, so the economy is the #1 issue. His age is. Ted Cruz isn't getting sued. You know, there's no threats to put him in jail. Hunter Biden, on the other hand, is a very different case. So Biden would have a very quiet presidency with the economy, you know, almost to it is in shambles. Thank you guys so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed this video. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. This is the Chaotic One saying peace.